Today, we're taking a deep dive into the world of corn tortillas. I'll show you how different brands of Masa Harina perform, how different pan materials perform, and most importantly, I'll teach you my two-pan tortilla method. If you don't have a huge, well-seasoned plancha, this is the key to consistently perfect texture and that elusive puff. Don't worry, it's not more dishes. The tortillas don't dirty the pans at all, so all you'll have to wash is one bowl. A huge thank you to my Patreon supporter, Carol. Hi, Carol, who has encouraged me to go down this rabbit hole and sent me so much useful info to get me started. First, let's talk about flavor. Corn tortillas have only 3 ingredients: Masa Harina, salt, and water. Masa Harina is the corn flour milled from nixtamalized corn. That's corn cooked with limestone or ash to make it more alkaline. You don't need to worry about all this chemistry. Just know that you cannot substitute regular cornmeal for Masa Harina. They're completely different products. I've tried every brand of Masa Harina that I could find in my stores: Maseca, Masienda, and Bob's Red Mill. Maseca is the cheapest and most popular brand. I tried both their white and yellow Masa Harina. Masienda is pricier and has all sorts of fancy words on the package, like heirloom. The only Masienda I could get my hands on was white, but they do make yellow and even blue corn flour that's available online. Bob's Red Mill is even pricier. The only one I could try was yellow. Flavor-wise, I liked yellow corn way more than white. White was completely neutral and had no personality. Heirloom white corn from Masienda didn't taste any better to me than the white corn from Maseca. Texture-wise, they all paled in comparison to Bob's Red Mill. Bob's Red Mill grinds their flour slightly coarser, giving the tortillas a very satisfying mouthfeel. Don't worry, it's not gritty, it's just perfect. It was the only brand whose tortillas did not get soggy after filling. Keep in mind that even expensive Masa Harina like Bob's Red Mill is not really expensive. A whole bag costs as much as one taco when you're eating out. I'll make the dough with white Maseca first and then with Bob's Red Mill to show you the difference in hydration. Because Bob's Red Mill is ground coarser, it will need less water. Here is Maseca. 200 grams of Masa Harina, the correct amount of salt for your salt type, and 300 grams of water at around 140 degrees, or roughly the temperature of hot tap water. Though you shouldn't cook with hot tap water, you want to start with cold water and warm it up in a kettle or a microwave. Start by mixing with a big spoon. Once you don't see any dry flour, switch to a kneading motion. Fold and press with one hand and rotate the bowl with the other. Once the flour absorbs the water, the mixture will cool off and you can get into it with your hand. Knead for 2 minutes, 3 if you are a slow kneader. Since corn contains no gluten, the kneading is very flexible. You can't over-knead, but there is also no need for a big workout here. We just want a perfectly homogeneous dough. At this stage, the dough should be quite sticky. Most of the best tortilla advice that I found online came from Rick Bayless, and he suggested making the dough quite wet in the beginning. He's absolutely right. After resting, the dough becomes way drier and dry tortillas crack and don't puff. After 2 minutes of kneading, check the texture by pressing the dough with a clean and dry finger. It should come away with just a hint of residue. If you live in a really dry climate, you might need a bit more water than I'm using, and in a really humid climate, you might need more flour. You can add them at this point and knead for another couple of minutes. I would suggest weighing them and writing it down so that you'll know what works for you next time. Portioning and resting can be done in any order. I prefer to portion first while my hands are messy. Weigh out 28-gram portions of dough and then roll them into balls. At this point, the consistency should be like Play-Doh and it shouldn't stick to you, though it might leave a bit of residue on your hands. If it's still sticking, you might need a bit more flour. Cover tightly with a damp paper towel and rest at least 30 minutes at room temperature. You're welcome to rest the dough longer as long as you cook it that day and keep an eye on the paper towel. If it starts to dry out, you need to re-wet it. One thing to keep in mind when making this dough is that every brand of Masa Harina is different and will require a very different amount of water. For Bob's Red Mill, I use only 275 grams of water instead of 300 grams. Even though it's less water, look how wet this dough is. Don't be tempted to add more flour. Knead for 2 minutes and then assess. If you can press a clean dry finger into it and come away with only a faint residue, you are good. This dough gets a lot drier than Maseca as it sits. See, here it is after 30 minutes rest. At this point, it's not sticky at all. Let's portion it and wrap it up. Tortilla presses are relatively inexpensive, and yes, you need one. On my first try, I used Chef John's tortilla-ass technique, and although it worked, it made the process really clunky and the thickness of tortillas somewhat uneven. Take a gallon Ziploc bag and cut off the top and the bottom to fit your press. Then cut off the sides so that you end up with 2 pieces of plastic. It's fine for the plastic to extend this way, but not this way, or you might get very annoying wrinkles and creases in your dough. Put a ball of dough on the first piece of plastic and press on it with your hand. If you get little cracks around the edges, that's fine. Top with the second piece of plastic and press. Then turn the tortilla around and press again to even out the thickness. Peel off the top plastic and check the thickness. You should end up with the thickness of a quarter. You don't need to check each tortilla. After the first one, you'll know if it feels right. Now comes the slightly tricky part. Gently pry the tortilla off the bottom plastic. Once you get a little flap, get it onto your index finger and peel the plastic off. As soon as it's in your hand, it goes into the skillet, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but first let's troubleshoot some common problems you might encounter during shaping. What if your ball cracks when you press on it? Just re-smoosh and re-roll the ball and you'll get rid of the cracks. If you're still getting cracks after re-rolling, either you let your dough dry up or you might need more water in the dough. Also, don't worry about little cracks. Re-rolling is only necessary for serious gashes. What if your tortilla rips when you're taking it off the plastic? No worries, re-roll and repress. But first you might want to wipe the plastic with a paper towel to remove any sticky residue. Tortillas are pretty fragile. It might take a little practice to learn how to peel them off the plastic, so be patient with yourself. The idea behind my 2-pan method came from Rick Bayless as well. He's a really fantastic teacher. He was using a large griddle set over 2 different heat settings. First, he put his tortillas over fairly low heat and cooked them on both sides until they released, but didn't color. Then he moved them over to the high heat area to get them to puff and color. Here is the reasoning behind this method. The low heat gets the outside of the tortilla to set, but keeps it soft and pliable. This traps the moisture inside. Then the tortilla goes over high heat, where the internal moisture expands and blows it up like a balloon. If your tortillas don't blow up perfectly, that's fine. They'll still be good, but this puff makes the tortilla texture almost flaky and particularly delicious. I don't have a large griddle, and I'm sure other home cooks might not have one either, but Rick's method is easy to simulate with 2 small skillets, one set over fairly low heat and one set over fairly high heat. All burners and skillets are different, so you'll have to play with yours to get the correct heat settings for you. We'll also need a place to steam our tortillas after they are cooked. Without the steaming step, they turn out too stiff. I use a small pot lined with a paper towel. I place the tortillas into it, cover them with another paper towel, and then with a lid that's slightly cracked. This way they become pliable but not soggy. Before you get started, you want to have your 4 stations prepped: the press, the low heat pan, the high heat pan, and the steaming pan. I know, lots of pans, but you won't have to wash any of them. As soon as you peel your tortilla off the plastic, put it into the low heat pan for about 20 seconds on the first side. You should get no color at this stage. Do not shove the spatula underneath it. It's too fragile for that. Carefully lift one side with a spatula and flip with your fingertips. Don't worry, you won't burn yourself. The tortilla is so thin it cools off instantly. Give it another 20 seconds and flip it out of the low heat pan and into the high heat pan. Some tortillas start to puff on their own, and some need a little help. If you press around the edges with a spatula, you'll help seal the sides and trap the moisture inside. We'll do some puffing troubleshooting later in the video, so if you're having puffing trouble, I promise we'll solve them. In about 45 to 60 seconds, your tortilla will get a few brown spots and you can flip it. Once you get a hint of color on the other side, place the tortillas into your steaming pan. Cover with a towel and the cracked lid. Now that you've seen a zoom in of each section, let's see how this assembly line comes together. Press your ball of dough, turn it around and press again. Flip the tortilla that's in the low heat pan, flip the tortilla that's in the high heat pan. Get out the tortilla from the high heat pan into the steaming pan. Flip the tortilla from low to high. Peel off the plastic and get the tortilla into the low pan. Press the next tortilla and peel off the top plastic. Flip the tortilla in the low pan. Flip the tortilla in the high pan. Move the tortilla from the high pan to the steamer. Move the tortilla from low to high. Peel off the plastic and place the tortilla into the low pan. Once you get into the rhythm, it's the most satisfying process. The low heat pan really needs to be non-stick. Teflon is the best choice for it, but a well-seasoned cast iron or carbon steel works too. The high heat pan can be made out of almost anything as long as it can be used on fairly high heat. My favorite pan to use for the high heat station is a little carbon steel pan, but I tried it with a Teflon pan and it was perfectly fine. The only thing I would be concerned about with Teflon is that the empty spots could overheat, and overheating Teflon is not a good idea. So if you use a Teflon pan, make sure it fits your tortilla perfectly. I also tried a stainless steel pan. I didn't grease it and got absolutely no sticking and a perfect puff. Not a perfect camera focus, but the tortilla was fine. I know it's tempting to get a big skillet and to put multiple tortillas into it. I've tried it. It doesn't work. You need to leave some space between tortillas for even heat distribution, so 2 small skillets are a much better option. I know that flipping the tortilla from one pan into another looks a bit scary. It's actually quite easy as long as your motion is quick. But if you don't like it, here's another option. Flip it back onto the first side using a spatula and your fingers in the low heat pan, and then slide it into the high heat pan. First, it's good to set realistic expectations. Not all tortillas puff, even for experienced tortilla makers. The first few of every batch puff very reluctantly for me, or not at all. But once the pan distributes the heat more evenly, they usually start puffing. I already showed you how you can press on the outside of the tortilla to help it puff. The next technique that I'll show you, I have no explanation for, but sometimes it does wonders. If your tortilla starts to puff around the edges but refuses to rise in the middle, try flipping it a few more times and pressing on it with the side of your spatula in the middle. This seems counterintuitive to me. If you wanted to go up in the middle, why would you press down on it? But it often works. My next tip has to do with steaming. If you're making more than 8 tortillas, you'll notice that the ones on the bottom are getting a little soggy, while the ones on top are a lot stiffer. Every 8 to 10 tortillas, I like to remove them from the pan, wipe out the moisture, add a new paper towel, and flip the stack of tortillas over. This way, the ones that were stiffer, because they were on top, end up on the bottom. When you finish cooking the last tortilla, give them all 5 minutes to finish steaming, and then they're ready to serve. If you're not going to serve them within the next 30 minutes, remove the lid from the pan where you are storing them to let them breathe a little. Otherwise, they might turn too soft. But keep them covered in paper towels or dish towels. The paper towels will be slightly damp at this point and will keep your tortillas from drying up. You can use them in the next several hours, but I would greatly discourage you from keeping them till the next day. Corn tortillas only stay fresh for so long. Even the best tortillas don't taste quite right when they are not toasted. Set the pan over high heat. Add some form of fat. Here I prefer a large pan because as soon as my tortillas are warmed up, I am topping and serving them. If I warm them up one at a time, the first one will be cold by the time I get to the last one. I like to flip them twice so that one side simply warms up and the other side turns slightly crispy. Guess which fat I just used to crisp mine up? Rendered pork fat from carnitas. So start practicing those corn tortillas now, because next week we are making this beauty. When I was learning to make tortillas, I would regularly whip up a small batch for lunch just to practice and fill it with whatever random leftovers I had in the house. The full batch produces around 16 tortillas, but it can easily be halved and even quartered. That's all for today, my friends. Here are more very detailed culinary tutorials for you to check out, and if you are ever in the Boston area, maybe I'll see you in one of my classes.